My name is Harry Thompson, and what I'm about to tell you will sound like something out of a movie. But I assure you, every word is true. This is the story of how my seemingly perfect marriage crumbled in the most unexpected way, and how one moment of carelessness on my wife's part exposed a web of lies that went deeper than I could have ever imagined. It all started in Chicago, in the spring of 2024. I was working as a construction project manager for Midwest Development Corp., overseeing the renovation of historic buildings downtown. The job paid well enough to support my wife Joan, who had been a stay-at-home spouse since we married 5 years earlier. We lived in my grandfather's Victorian house on Maple Street in Lincoln Park, a property that had been in my family for 3 generations. Joan and I met at a coffee shop near Northwestern University in 2018. She was working on her master's degree in art history, and I was immediately drawn to her intelligence and passion for Renaissance paintings. She had this way of describing Caravaggio's use of light that made me fall in love with both the art and the artist discussing it. Our courtship was like something from a romantic comedy. Weekend trips to art museums, long walks along Lake Michigan, intimate dinners where we'd talk until 3 a.m. about everything and nothing. When I proposed on the observation deck of the Willis Tower in December 2019, she cried tears of joy and said yes before I could even finish my rehearsed speech. The first few years of marriage were blissful. Joan threw herself into decorating our home, turning it into something that could have been featured in Architectural Digest. She joined the Lincoln Park Historical Society and volunteered at the Art Institute. I thought we had built the perfect life together. But perfection, as I learned, is often just an illusion. The changes started subtly in February 2024. Joan began spending more time at the gym. She claimed she wanted to get in shape for our 5th wedding anniversary. She started buying expensive skincare products and designer workout clothes. When I complimented her new appearance, she'd smile and change the subject. Then came the late nights out. "Sarah and I are going to that new wine bar in River North," she'd say, grabbing her purse and keys. Sarah Mitchell was Joan's college roommate, now a successful real estate agent who lived in Gold Coast. I'd met her several times at dinner parties and always found her pleasant enough, though Joan seemed to become a different person around her, more animated, more secretive. The text messages were next. Joan had never been particularly attached to her phone, but suddenly it was always in her hand. She'd smile at the screen with an expression I didn't recognize, soft, almost dreamy. When I'd ask who was texting, she'd say it was Sarah or her mother, but something in her tone felt rehearsed. "You seem distracted lately," I mentioned one evening in early March as we sat in our living room. Joan was curled up in the antique armchair that had belonged to my grandmother, scrolling through her tablet while I watched the Bulls game. "Just planning some new volunteer projects at the museum," she replied without looking up. "There's a lot of coordination involved." I accepted her explanation because I wanted to believe it. That's what you do when you love someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt, even when doubt starts creeping in around the edges of your thoughts. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in mid-March. I remember the date exactly, March 19th. The weather was unusually warm for Chicago in March, and Joan had opened all the windows to let in the spring air. She'd made dinner, her famous chicken piccata, and we'd eaten by candlelight like we used to when we were newlyweds. After dinner, Joan said she was tired and went to bed early. I stayed in the living room to catch up on some project reports for work. My laptop battery was dying, and my charger was upstairs. Joan's tablet was sitting on the coffee table, and I knew she wouldn't mind if I borrowed it to check my email quickly. When I opened the email app, I realized it was synced to her account instead of mine. I was about to switch accounts when a notification popped up, a new message that made my blood run cold. The sender was listed only as M, with a phone number I didn't recognize. The subject line was blank, but the preview text was enough. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can we?" My hands started shaking. I clicked on the message thread and felt my world collapse. The conversation went back weeks. Intimate messages, plans for secret meetings, expressions of desire that Joan had never shared with me. The most recent exchange was from that very afternoon. "M. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place." Joan. "Yes, 2 p.m. Harry has that site inspection downtown, so we'll have plenty of time." I sat there staring at the screen, feeling like I was drowning. Tomorrow was Wednesday. I did indeed have a site inspection scheduled for 2 p.m. Joan knew my schedule better than I did, apparently, and was using it to plan her affair. I scrolled through more messages, each one a dagger to my heart. They'd been meeting at a boutique hotel in River North. M had a room there, apparently a regular arrangement. The messages were explicit, passionate, and worst of all, they revealed that Joan was happier with this person than she'd ever seemed with me. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. As I read deeper into the conversation, I noticed something odd. M never used gendered pronouns when talking about their meetings. No he or she, just carefully neutral language. And some of the references were confusing, mentions of the group and our arrangement that didn't sound like typical affair talk. Curiosity overcoming my devastation, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked Joan's browser history. What I found made me realize that my wife's betrayal was more complex than a simple affair. She'd been visiting websites for something called lifestyle communities and ethical non-monogamy groups. There were forums about exploring new relationship dynamics and finding like-minded couples. My traditional, art history-loving wife had apparently been living a double life that involved much more than one secret lover. I closed the tablet and sat in the darkness of our living room, listening to the sound of Joan's even breathing from upstairs. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 5 years was a complete stranger to me. The next morning, I acted normal. I made coffee, kissed Joan goodbye like always, and went to work. But inside, I was planning. I'm a project manager. I know how to think strategically, how to plan for contingencies. If Joan wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules before I made my move. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former Chicago PD detective who specialized in matrimonial cases. I gave him Joan's phone number, the hotel information I'd gleaned from the messages, and her typical schedule. I need to know everything, I told him in his cramped office above a deli on Western Avenue. Who she's seeing, how long it's been going on, and what exactly I'm dealing with. Webb was a thin man in his 50s with tired eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. You sure you want to know everything, Mr. Thompson? Sometimes ignorance is bliss. I'm sure. Okay, give me 2 weeks. Those were the longest 2 weeks of my life. I continued my normal routine, going to work, coming home to dinner with Joan, pretending everything was fine. She seemed more affectionate than usual, perhaps overcompensating for her guilt. We even made love twice during those weeks, though I felt like I was with a stranger. Meanwhile, Joan's behavior became even more suspicious. She joined a book club that met on Thursday evenings. She started taking weekend trips to visit her sick aunt in Milwaukee, an aunt I'd never heard of in 5 years of marriage. Her phone was now permanently attached to her hand, and she'd started sleeping with it under her pillow. Webb called me on a Friday afternoon. We need to meet. You're not going to like what I found. That evening, in a dive bar on the north side, Marcus Webb laid out the evidence that would change my life forever. He spread photographs across the sticky table, like a dealer revealing a winning hand. Your wife, he said, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign, is involved with something called the Chicago Alternative Lifestyle Network. It's a group of couples and singles who engage in, let's call it consensual non-traditional relationships. The photographs showed Joan entering and leaving the boutique hotel with different people, men and women both. There were pictures of her at restaurants I'd never heard of, laughing intimately with strangers. But the most shocking photo showed her at what appeared to be a private party in a Lincoln Park mansion, dressed in clothes I'd never seen before. The person she's been texting, M, that's Madison Chin, a 34-year-old financial advisor who organizes these gatherings. Your wife has been attending for about 4 months, according to my sources. Webb slid a thick folder across the table. Bank records show she's been spending money you probably don't know about. Cash withdrawals, payments to hotels, expensive dinners. She's been funding this lifestyle with your joint account. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The evidence was overwhelming. Credit card statements showing charges at lingerie boutiques and upscale hotels, restaurant bills for expensive meals I'd never shared, even payments to something called discreet transportation services. There's more, Webb continued. She's been telling people in this group that she's planning to leave you. Apparently, she's found someone she wants to be with long-term, a tech entrepreneur named David Reeves who's also married, but looking to make changes in his life. The betrayal was complete, but the revelation that Joan was planning to leave me actually came as a relief. At least I wouldn't have to be the one to end our marriage. What do you want to do with this information? Webb asked. I want a divorce, I said, but I want to do it smart. Here's where I made a decision that would save me financially and emotionally. Instead of confronting Joan immediately, I spent the next week consulting with the best divorce attorney in Chicago, a sharp woman named Rebecca Martinez who had a reputation for protecting her clients' assets. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, Martinez explained in her downtown office with its view of the Chicago River. But adultery can still impact property division and spousal support, especially when marital funds have been used to facilitate the affair. We developed a strategy. I would offer Joan a lump sum to walk away quietly, avoiding a messy public divorce that would be expensive for both of us. The house was mine by inheritance and wasn't subject to division anyway, but I wanted her gone with minimal fuss. The key, Martinez advised, is to make her think she's getting a good deal while actually protecting your assets. I went home that night and found Joan in the kitchen, preparing what she claimed was her grandmother's lasagna recipe. She was actually humming, while she cooked. The audacity of her happiness while she was destroying our marriage was almost too much to bear. "Joan," I said, sitting down at our kitchen island, "we need to talk." She looked up from the stove, and for just a moment, I saw fear flash across her face. "About what?" "About us. About our marriage. I think we both know something has changed." She put down the wooden spoon and turned to face me fully. "Harry, if this is about me being out more lately, I can explain." "I don't need explanations," I interrupted. "I need a divorce." The color drained from her face. "What? Harry, you can't be serious. We can work through whatever problems you think we have. I know about Madison Chin. I know about David Reeves. I know about the Chicago Alternative Lifestyle Network. I know everything, Joan." She sat down heavily in the chair across from me, her hands shaking. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to hire a lawyer and a private investigator. Long enough to document everything you've been doing with our money and our marriage." Joan started crying, not the delicate tears of a woman caught in an indiscretion, but the ugly, desperate sobbing of someone whose world was collapsing. "Harry, please. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was just exploration. I was trying to figure out who I am." "You figured out who you are by betraying who we were," I replied. "I'm not interested in fighting about it. I'm offering you a clean break. $50,000 cash. You sign away any claim to the house, and we file for an amicable divorce." Joan looked up at me through her tears. "50,000? Harry, we've been married 5 years. Don't I deserve more than that?" "You deserve exactly what you earned through 5 years of lying and cheating. Take the offer, Joan. It's more generous than what you'd get if we went to court with all the evidence I have." She was quiet for a long time, and I could see her calculating her options. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but I need time to find a place to live and figure out what I'm going to do. You have 2 weeks. After that, I want you out of my house." Joan moved in with Sarah Mitchell, her supposed best friend who, it turned out, had been covering for her affair all along. Sarah lived in a luxury condo in Gold Coast and seemed happy to host Joan while she figured things out. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The divorce proceedings were scheduled for June 15th, 2024. Everything had been prepared: the settlement agreement, the financial disclosures, the asset division. Joan would get her $50,000, I would keep the house and my retirement accounts, and we would both be free to move on with our lives. I arrived at the Cook County Courthouse that morning feeling lighter than I had in months. My attorney Rebecca Martinez met me in the corridor outside the courtroom. "This should be straightforward," she said, reviewing our paperwork one last time. "Mrs. Thompson signs the agreement, Judge Patterson approves the settlement, and you walk out a free man." But when Joan walked into the courtroom at 9 a.m., I knew immediately that something had changed. She was wearing a loose-fitting blue dress and had one hand resting protectively on her stomach. Her smile was triumphant, like a poker player about to reveal a royal flush. Judge Patricia Patterson, a stern woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair, called our case to order. "This is the matter of Thompson versus Thompson, proceeding under the Illinois Marriage and Dissolution of Marriage Act. I understand we have a settlement agreement." Joan's attorney, a slick-looking man named Bradley Pierce, stood up. "Your Honor, my client would like to address the court before we proceed with the settlement." Rebecca shot me a confused look. "This wasn't part of the plan." Judge Patterson nodded. "Very well. Mrs. Thompson, you may speak." Joan stood up slowly, one hand still on her stomach, and turned to look directly at me before addressing the judge. "Your Honor, I need to inform the court that I am pregnant with my husband's child." The words hit me like a physical blow. The courtroom fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from LaSalle Street. Joan continued, her voice gaining strength. I discovered my pregnancy 3 weeks ago, after we filed these divorce papers. This changes everything, Your Honor. My husband is trying to abandon his family, his pregnant wife and unborn child. I don't think the current settlement adequately addresses the needs of our growing family. Judge Patterson frowned and looked at me over her reading glasses. Mr. Thompson, were you aware of your wife's pregnancy? I stood up slowly, my mind racing. Joan was still smiling at me, confident that she had just played her winning card. Her attorney looked pleased with himself. Even the court reporter seemed to lean forward with interest. But Joan had made a critical error in her calculations. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head. I had a vasectomy in November 2018 at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I have the complete medical records with me today. The silence that followed was deafening. Joan's smile faltered, then disappeared entirely. She sat down hard in her chair, her face going pale. Her attorney started frantically shuffling through papers, clearly caught off guard. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out a folder that Rebecca had prepared, I have documentation of my wife's extramarital relationships, including evidence that she has been involved with multiple partners through an organization called the Chicago Alternative Lifestyle Network. The child she is carrying is not mine, and I have medical proof to support that statement. Judge Patterson's expression shifted from confusion to something that might have been annoyance. She'd clearly seen her share of courtroom drama, but this was exceptional even by Cook County standards. Mrs. Thompson, the judge said coldly, is there anything you'd like to say in response to your husband's statement? Joan looked at her attorney desperately, but Bradley Pierce was staring down at his papers like they might contain magical answers to an impossible situation. Your Honor, Joan stammered, the vasectomy. I didn't think. You didn't think it would be relevant? Judge Patterson's voice could have frozen Lake Michigan. Mrs. Thompson, do you understand that making false statements to this court could constitute perjury? Joan's attorney finally spoke up. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client. 5 minutes, counselor. Make it count. Joan practically ran out of the courtroom, her attorney trailing behind her like a confused puppy. Rebecca leaned over to me and whispered, Did you really have a vasectomy? I nodded and showed her the medical records. Best decision I ever made, apparently. When court reconvened, Joan looked like she'd been crying in the bathroom. Her triumphant entrance had been replaced by the demeanor of someone who'd just realized they'd bet everything on a losing hand. Your Honor, Bradley Pierce said weakly, my client accepts the original settlement terms. Judge Patterson reviewed the paperwork with obvious impatience. Mr. Thompson, are you satisfied with the settlement agreement as originally written? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Thompson, do you understand that by signing this agreement, you are waiving any claim to spousal support and acknowledging that the pregnancy you mentioned is not the result of marital relations with Mr. Thompson? Joan's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. The divorce was finalized in less than 10 minutes. I wrote Joan a check for $50,000 right there in the courthouse lobby. She took it without looking at me and walked away with her attorney, her shoulders shaking with what I assumed were tears of humiliation. I thought that would be the end of Joan Thompson in my life. I was wrong again. The phone calls started the next day. At first, it was just once or twice, Joan leaving voicemails asking me to call her back because she needed to talk. I ignored them. Then it escalated to 5 or 6 calls a day. Then a dozen. By the end of the first week, my phone was ringing every hour. The voicemails started desperate and became increasingly frantic. Harry, please call me. I made a terrible mistake. We can work this out. Harry, I know you're angry, but we were married for 5 years. Doesn't that count for something? Harry, I'm scared. I don't know what I'm going to do with this baby. After 2 weeks, she was calling 40 or 50 times a day. I had to block her number, but she started calling from different phones, Sarah's phone, numbers I didn't recognize, even what appeared to be payphones. The voicemails revealed a story that was both pathetic and infuriating. David Reeves, the tech entrepreneur she'd planned to run away with, had apparently disappeared the moment he learned about the pregnancy. Madison Chen and the Chicago Alternative Lifestyle Network had cut ties with her completely. Apparently, unplanned pregnancies were bad for their carefully orchestrated arrangements. Sarah Mitchell had grown tired of housing a pregnant, unemployed woman who cried constantly and had asked Joan to find somewhere else to live. Joan was staying in a cheap motel near O'Hare, burning through the $50,000 I'd given her on hotel bills and doctor visits. Harry, she sobbed in one particularly devastating voicemail. I lost everything. David won't return my calls. Madison says I'm too much drama for the group. Sarah says I can't stay with her anymore because I'm too depressing. I don't have anywhere to go, and I don't know how I'm going to take care of this baby. Please, Harry. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm desperate. But the most shocking revelation came in a voicemail she left at 3 a.m. one Tuesday night, when she was clearly drunk or on some kind of medication. Harry, I have to tell you something. The baby, it might not even be David's. There were others. So many others over the past few months. I don't even know who the father is. The doctor says I need to get paternity tests, but I can't afford them. I can't afford anything. The lifestyle group, it wasn't just about exploring sexuality, Harry. I was running away from us, from our boring life, from being your boring wife. I wanted to feel alive again, and I destroyed everything instead. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That voicemail was the last one I listened to in full. After that, I'd see your name on my phone and just delete the message without playing it. 3 months after our divorce was finalized, the calls finally stopped. I learned why from Sarah Mitchell, who contacted me through LinkedIn of all places. Harry, her message read, I thought you should know that Joan had the baby, a girl. She gave her up for adoption through Catholic Charities. She's moved to Denver to live with her cousin and try to start over. She asked me to tell you that she's sorry for everything and she hopes you can find happiness. She also wanted you to know that she's getting help, therapy, and support groups. She realizes now that she had some kind of breakdown and made choices that hurt everyone, especially you. I never responded to Sarah's message. That was 8 months ago. I still live in my grandfather's house on Maple Street, but I've made it mine now. I renovated the kitchen, updated the master bathroom, and converted Joan's old art studio into a home office. I'm dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'm open to possibilities. Sometimes I wonder about Joan and her daughter in Denver. I hope she's found some peace, and that she's getting the help she needs. But I don't think about her often anymore. The experience taught me something important about trust and forgiveness. There are some betrayals that cut so deep that they change the fundamental structure of who you are. Joan didn't just cheat on me. She constructed an elaborate false reality that made our entire marriage a lie. Forgiving that level of deception would have required me to become someone I'm not. I'm not bitter, but I'm not sorry either. Joan made her choices, and she's living with the consequences. I made mine, and I'm living with mine too. Some people might say I should have shown more compassion, that I should have helped her when she was desperate and pregnant. But compassion doesn't mean accepting responsibility for someone else's self-destructive choices. Joan created her own disaster, and expecting me to rescue her from it would have been the cruelest thing I could do to both of us. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions without cushioning the impact. Joan needed to hit rock bottom to start climbing back up. Rescuing her would have only enabled her to make the same mistakes again. As for me, I'm rebuilding my life on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. The next woman I fall in love with will know exactly who I am and what I expect from a relationship. There won't be any secrets, any alternate lifestyles, or any room for the kind of elaborate deception that Joan thrived on. I've learned to trust my instincts again. When something feels wrong, it probably is. When someone's behavior changes dramatically, there's usually a reason. When your partner starts hiding their phone and making excuses for unexplained absences, you don't need more evidence, you need better boundaries. But most importantly, I've learned that some endings are actually beginnings. The end of my marriage to Joan was the beginning of my real adult life. A life where I make decisions based on reality instead of wishful thinking, where I value honesty over harmony, and where I understand that love without trust is just elaborate self-deception. Joan taught me that it's possible to love someone who doesn't exist. The woman I married was a performance, carefully crafted to give me what I thought I wanted while hiding who she really was. When that performance became too much work, she dropped it and showed me her true self. I'm grateful for that revelation, even though it was painful. Better to live with uncomfortable truth than comfortable lies. Today, I'm sitting in my renovated kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the snow fall on Maple Street. It's peaceful here. Honest. Real. Joan's absence doesn't feel like a loss anymore. It feels like recovery. And that, I think, is the point of the whole story. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel. So subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video, there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.